All right, let's take you to this conversation. On the continent we move to now. Ugandan President Yoweri Museveni has confirmed that he will contest next year's presidential election to be held on the 12th of January. Now, should he win, the 80-year-old will extend his 4-decade rule. Earlier, I sat down with opposition leader Robert Kyagulanyi Ssentamu, popularly known by his stage name Bobi, who was just recently in South Africa to encourage his supporters to vote so they can go back home to what he says will be a better Uganda. Mr. Bobi, welcome back to South Africa. So many questions, and we're really looking forward to the discussion that we will have in this conversation. I think a great place for us to start is to ask, once again, what brings you to South Africa?
Thank you very much, first of all, for having me, Naledi. I'm very glad to be in South Africa. What brings me here? So many things, but among them is to charge up our diaspora membership here. We have lots and lots of Ugandans that are here. Many of them are refugees, economic refugees, political refugees, and the like. They live here, but they know that this is not their home. They want to come home. They're facing tough times, especially in this period here. They want to come home. And I come here to remind them that with their involvement, we can change home. So I come here to charge them, but also to seek support from them in different ways, ideologically, logistically. That is present right now is an uncompromising opposition. We don't want anything but to break the regime and start a new Uganda.
But then there's the question around how you have a president that has been in power since 1986, and constitutionally there is an allowing to give him the opportunity to run for what is it now, his 8th term.
Yeah, no, it has not been that. I mean, in 2005, General Museveni had run his terms, and we had term limits. The constitution was restricting presidents to only 2 terms. Now, in 2005, he paid 25 million to every member of parliament. No, that was 5 million to every member of parliament to change the constitution. And amidst public uproar, he changed the constitution to allow him run for another term and another term and another term. However, there was still another break in the constitution, the age limit, because the constitution of 1995 was not allowing anybody beyond the age of 75 to run for president. And General Museveni himself, on an interview with Jeff Konaige, said, yeah, I would definitely not run after 75 because even the mental capabilities.
Now he's 80.
Now he's 80 plus. But in 2017, 2018, he brought a bill to change that. And yes, having paid 25 million to all members of parliament, having sent the military in the parliament, I was a member of parliament then, you must have seen a fight, a physical fight that happened in parliament when soldiers stormed parliament, beat up members of parliament, and they forcefully changed the constitution. So whenever the law seems like an impediment to him, he's going to use the military and all manner of machinations to change it. So yeah, that is what General Museveni does. As a matter of fact, I'm saying this and I'm sure if Ugandans don't succeed in dropping this old man, there's an idea of changing the constitution to take away the right and power from the citizens to elect a president. He wants to reserve that for the parliament. So he keeps changing the law, and the whole idea is to stay in power.
Yeah. When do we, start to have, I suppose, a louder conversation on the continent around African leaders that don't want to let go of power? Just lately, we've been having a discussion around Paul Biya of Cameroon wanting to run for power at 92 years old.
Yeah.
And maybe you can talk about what we're losing and how it can be turned around. Perhaps who AU member states, African states that simply aren't speaking out.
Well, I can't reinvent the wheel. That question came in the 80s to a great Nigerian author called Chinua Achebe, asked about what Nigeria's problem was, and he eloquently said that Nigeria's problem are not the hills or valleys or lakes, but the leadership. But again, General Museveni put it even more aptly in 1986, and it featured in his book called What is Africa's Problem? And he eloquently stated that Africa's problem in general, and Uganda in particular, are the leaders that overstay in power. That was 40 years ago. He does not want anybody to remind him of that. So our problem in Africa has been unchecked power. And as you know how, absolute power corrupts. So he got trapped into the trappings of power, and that's where we are. That is not only a problem in Uganda, it's a problem all over Africa. Of course, we must credit the moral leaders in Africa, leaders like J.J. Rawlings of Ghana, who gave power back to the people, and many other leaders that have overcome that. I mean, the great Nelson Mandela, I've said it many times that somebody might struggle to point out what exactly Mandela did, but the whole world knows that Mandela overcame power. He rose above power. A guy who had suffered for 27 years, ruled for only one term, and allowed South Africa to proceed. Probably that's why we are here. That's why you don't have a dictator that rises up in South Africa and says, oh, I'm going to be president again and again and again, because Madiba did it. We need to have that. It's a shame that in Africa today, even the bloc organizations are not helping. You asked if we are having that conversation about aging leaders sticking to power. We are having that conversation. And we indeed have had those conversations with some leaders. Some of them have since, ascended to positions of leaders. But the challenge is that we tend, not only in Africa, but all over the world, leaders tend to put diplomacy ahead of democracy, where they have to be in good books of those leaders, however evil those leaders are. I think we need to change that so that the East African community does what it ought to do, focus on East Africans, not just the leaders. The African Union needs to do the same. It needs to stand for the Africans, not for the African leaders. These organizations need to cease being President's Club, looking out for the leaders. They need to look out for the people.
Yeah. As you are here in South Africa, are there any political formations of South Africa that you have formed relationships with that perhaps are showing some sort of support here in South Africa?
We have not just formed relationships. We have relationships with various leaders in South Africa. We share thoughts, we share ideas.
Any names that you can share with me?
Of course, many of them. I mean, Julius Malema is a brother and he shares thoughts. My brother Musi Maimani does, and a few others. So yeah, we are in touch with various parties. Also the leadership of Konto Isizwe, where we are in touch. Everybody that wishes Africa good, we are in touch. We communicate, we share ideas, and we learn from them. I mean, this is a much more matured democracy that we have so much to learn from, but also we have so much to demand from, not as entitlement, but as a brotherhood. We are each other's keeper. We are our brothers' keepers. I mean, our parents stood for South Africans. So it's a moral duty for South Africans to stand with us in order to give us and our posterity a moral duty to stand with any other part of Africa. The great Martin Luther King taught us that oppression and injustice anywhere is a threat to freedom everywhere. So yeah, let's look out for each other so we can enjoy this beautiful...
I'm going to squeeze in one last question. And I know that sounded quite final already, but let me squeeze one last one in. Here in South Africa at the moment, we're having such a big debate around whether or not there has been infiltration in some of our most precious institutions, the judiciary, the police, and even Parliament. And we're having a discussion, an inward look at the integrity of these all-important institutions that are so important to the quality of a democracy. Perhaps you can have a message to share about South Africa around how critical this moment is as a fellow African, and then your call to action to the South African government, particularly as we close off?
I'm in no moral position to guide the South African leadership on how they conduct business here, but I would say they should do the right thing. Everything they do should be for the benefit of their people. They should always look back in the years when they were under apartheid. The people, especially African people here, always wished to have their own children in charge. They always hoped that it would be better when their own children, when their own kith and kin are in charge. Now, the constant question that should be ringing in their mind, are we doing what our people expected us to do? Are we making Mandela proud? Are we making Sobukwe proud? Are we making Solomon Matanga proud? Are we making all these people that gave their blood, their lives to ensure that their children live in full dignity? Are we making them proud? That is not my question to answer. That's to the leadership. For us who are still struggling for the right to be human beings, because what we're struggling for is the right to live like real humans in our motherland, to have real freedom, the right to express ourselves, the right to be full Africans with full African dignity in 2025. All we ask of the leadership of South Africa is that if they cannot help us, at least let them not be seen empowering our oppression. It breaks our hearts to see that Uganda did not stand with the apartheid regime. Even when passports were being issued in the 80s and early 90s, there was a stamp to every country except South Africa. Unfortunately, today, it hurts the people of Uganda to see that General Museveni can massacre hundreds of people on the streets in order to stay in power, and he's going to have a red carpet rolled for him and cows shared. You know, it's a slap in the face of the people of Uganda, you know. So if you cannot help them, don't be seen to help their oppressor. Otherwise, you'll be a partner in crime. Otherwise, that's not the best reward to our fathers and our mothers and our ancestors that stood with you. Now, to the South African population, I'll also say that on behalf of the people of Uganda and all other Africans that live here, I understand that the xenophobic situation is so sensitive here. But majority of Africans are not here because they want. They are here because they're running away from fire. The same way you guys were in Uganda or in Tanzania or in Nigeria or wherever in the 70s and 80s and early 90s, you were running away from fire. So it breaks our hearts to see that an African is called Kwere Kwere in the land of their brothers. It was not our choice in 1884 when these borders were being drawn, you know. We understand deeply that the resources are limited and not even enough for the South Africans here. So it's not the best thing for other wanting Africans to come and squeeze in those resources. So bear with us, please. Bear with our people. We are struggling to make our countries better, and they will be better. So bear with us, and also know that is part of the failures of the leaderships here. You would not be having Zimbabweans streaming into South Africa if Zimbabwe was well governed. The same applies to Uganda and many other countries. So be our brothers and our sisters. That is just a request, not a command. Yeah.
I can tell you that that last part is going to spark quite the debate in South Africa, but thank you so much.
Debate is what we want.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us,
thank
Mr. Robert Kyagulanyi Ssentamu, popularly known as Bobi Wine, on his visit to South Africa as he garners support ahead of the January 2026 elections in Uganda. Well, of course, in response to that discussion with Bobi Wine, we did reach out to the Ugandan government and give them an opportunity to respond to some of the allegations put forward by Bobi Wine in that discussion. We did get a short response from Sando Walusimbi, who is General Yoweri Museveni's press secretary, of course, that being the Ugandan president. And it reads, number one, the president was elected by the people of Uganda and not parliament. And number two, which legislation is he referring to that government has changed? Since Bobi Wine participated in the last general election, which provisions of the law have been changed to keep President Museveni in power? The constitution is very clear on governance in general elections, and on trying civilians in military courts, the parliament complied with the decision of the Supreme Court and amended the law on trial of civilians. We take a short break. We do have your top stories and headlines at the top of the hour.